Hey, my name's Ben Lawson. I live alone in a small flat on the outskirts of Manchester. It's nothing fancy, a one-bedroom with creaky floors, a tiny kitchenette, and a view of the car park below. I work the afternoon shifts at an independent bookshop and coffee shop in the northern quarter. It's steady work, pays the rent, but leaves me with a lot of quiet evenings. No family around to fill the silence. My mum passed when I was young, and I've been on my own since university. Some nights it's fine, others it weighs on you. My best mate is Jack Parker. We've been tight since our first year at the University of Manchester. Jack's the kind of lad who can walk into a room and make friends with everyone straight away. Loud laugh, quick jokes, always planning some weekend hike or night out. He's got that effortless charm I never quite figured out. We met in a general lecture, bonded over hating the lecturers droning on, and stuck together ever since. These days, he works at a marketing firm in the city centre, entry-level stuff, but he's got big plans. We hang out a couple of times a week, grab a pint, watch the footy, or just chat about nothing. His mum, Laura Parker, I always saw in one role before all this, Jack's mum. Polite, put together, the type who bakes lasagna from scratch and asks about your day like she actually cares. Ben, how's the job treating you? Or, fancy taking some leftovers home? I made too much. She's not overly chatty, but there's a warmth to her that makes you lower your voice a bit when you're around, like you're in on something comfortable. She's got short, wavy brown hair, usually pinned back, and dresses simply, jeans, jumpers, nothing flashy. I never thought much beyond that. She was just part of the background when I'd swing by their house. It all started one evening. I was in my kitchen reheating some cold pizza in the microwave, scrolling through my phone with the telly murmuring in the background. Nothing planned, just another quiet evening. Then my phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me pick up. Ben? A woman's voice, familiar but tense. It's Laura, Jack's mum. I straightened up immediately, like she could see me through the line. Yeah. Hi, everything okay? Her breathing was a little uneven, like she was annoyed at herself for sounding rattled. She explained there was this weird noise in the basement, scratching, thumping, like something was trapped down there. Jack was away on a ski trip with his girlfriend and not picking up. She'd called animal control, but they said it would be hours before anyone could come. She was home alone, and it was freaking her out. I didn't hesitate. I'll be right over. The drive took me through quiet suburban streets, past shopping centers and lit-up takeaways. Their house is a two-story semi-detached in a leafy neighborhood, the kind with wide driveways and front steps. When I pulled in, Laura was already out on the front steps, arms crossed over her chest, pacing a little. She looked different from the usual put-together version I knew. Oversized sweatshirt, black leggings, hair tied low and a bit messy. No makeup, just the porch light casting shadows on her face. She exhaled visibly when she saw me get out of the car, almost smiling in relief. Thank God, she said, stepping forward. I know this sounds ridiculous, but I really didn't want to go down there by myself. No problem at all, I replied, grabbing my phone's torch just in case. She handed me a headlamp and a pair of leather gloves, then led me inside. The house smelled like fresh laundry and faint vanilla from a candle somewhere. The basement door was at the end of the hallway near the laundry room. Even from the top step I could hear it rustling, a dull thud against something solid. I'll go down alone, I said. She nodded, staying up top. The basement was bigger than I remembered, cluttered with holiday boxes, Jack's old sports gear, gardening tools stacked in corners. Dust motes floated in the beam of the headlamp, and the air had that musty wood smell. I moved slowly, shining the light into shadows, listening. After a few minutes of poking around, I found it. A raccoon wedged behind an old cabinet near the small window. It hissed a little when the light hit it, but didn't seem aggressive. I opened the window wide, grabbed a broom from the corner, and gently prodded until it scrambled up the sill and bolted out into the garden. I came back up dusty, hair tousled, sleeves rolled. Laura was waiting in the kitchen with a glass of cold lemonade. You just saved my life, she said, handing it over. I laughed it off. Just a raccoon, no big deal. She shook her head. No, I mean it. I would have sat here all night listening to that and imagining the worst. We ended up on the back patio, the night air warm with the hum of crickets. British summers linger like that, mild and alive. She told me about Jack's trip, how she'd been clearing the basement when the noise started. I shared stories from the bookshop, quirky customers, the chap who always orders rare sci-fi imports, the espresso machine that breaks every other week. It was easy talk, nothing deep, but it stretched on. For the first time, I saw glimpses of her beyond the mum role. The way she leaned back in her chair, the soft laugh when I joked about my lousy latte art. By the time I headed out, the house lights were dim behind me. Driving home, I kept replaying her relieved exhale on the steps, the way she'd breathed out like someone pulling her from a small panic. And for the first time, I thought of Laura not just as Jack's mum, but as a woman alone in a house too big for one person. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't intentional. It was just an evening I helped with a trapped animal and stayed longer than I needed to. That was the starting point. After that night with the raccoon, things shifted in small ways I didn't notice at first. Laura started waving whenever I pulled up to pick up Jack or drop off something he'd borrowed. It wasn't a big gesture, just a quick wave from the kitchen window or the front steps. But it felt different from the polite nods she'd given before, like we'd shared some harmless secret. And now there was this unspoken ease between us. Nothing overt, nothing that would raise eyebrows, but enough to make me linger a second longer in the driveway. At the beginning, the reasons for me sticking around their house were still completely innocent. Jack would text me to come over and help move some boxes from the garage. He was always accumulating junk from his side gigs, and I'd end up staying a bit. Laura would poke her head out and ask if I could swap out a light bulb in the back garden while I was there, since Jack was too busy with his video games to hear me calling. I'd say, "Sure, no problem. Simple stuff." But after each little task, she'd insist I sit down for something to eat. "I made too much," she'd say, pulling out a plate of turkey sandwiches or grilled salmon leftovers from dinner. Or it would be pasta salad with fresh basil from her garden, or an apple pie she'd picked up at the local market. It wasn't pushy, it was just her way. And I'd sit at the kitchen island, fork in hand, while she leaned against the counter, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Those moments stretched out because the kitchen didn't feel so empty with someone there to talk to. I started learning more about her in those snippets of conversation. Laura didn't dump her life story on me. It came out in pieces, casual, like she was reminding herself as much as telling me. She'd mention how the house used to be full, her husband Mike, Jack running around as a kid, his sister practicing piano in the living room. Mike had passed away a few years ago from heart complications after a rough hospital stay. It wasn't sudden, but it wasn't easy either. Jack had thrown himself into studies and friends to cope, and his sister had headed off to further studies soon after. Now the place echoed a bit too much for just her and Jack, who was home less and less these days. She'd listen when I talked too, about my shifts at the bookshop, the regular who always argued about book prices, or how I'd lost my mum young and never really had that family anchor. Laura had this way of nodding, her eyes steady like she was really hearing it. Not pitying, just understanding. It made the air in the room feel lighter somehow. One afternoon stands out. Jack was upstairs napping off a late night, and Laura asked if I could help replant some lavender along the side fence. The old bushes had died over the winter, and she wanted to freshen up the yard. It was a warm day, sun filtering through the trees, the kind where the dirt was dry and crumbled easily under your fingers. We knelt side by side in the soil, gloves on, digging small holes and pressing the new plants in. My knees ached after a while, and sweat beaded on my forehead, but it was oddly peaceful. The smell of earth, the quiet rhythm of our hands working. Laura reached up to brush a strand of hair from her face, but her glove left a streak of dirt across her cheek. I laughed without thinking, a short, genuine burst. "You've got a little something right there," I said, pointing. She touched it, smearing it worse, and rolled her eyes with a grin. "Great! Now I look like I've been mud wrestling." Without really planning it, I leaned in and wiped it off with my thumb. It was a quick touch, barely a second, but the air changed. Her skin was warm under the dirt, and she went still, her eyes meeting mine, not pulling away, not flinching, just holding the gaze a beat longer than normal. Then she smiled, soft and real, the kind that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "Thanks," she said quietly. "No problem." We finished the planting in silence after that, but the moment hung there unspoken. As I washed my hands in the kitchen sink later, I caught her watching me from the doorway, her expression thoughtful. She handed me a towel, our fingers brushing just a fraction longer than necessary. From then on, the interactions had a different weight. When I'd hand her something, a tool, a plate, our hands would touch, and she'd let it linger. Once, while Jack was upstairs, I helped her fix a sticky kitchen window. She stood close, her shoulder almost against mine, and when it popped open, she laughed, a full, unguarded sound, and turned to me with eyes that softened in a way I hadn't seen before. We'd talk about nothing important, but her voice would drop a little when it was just us, warmer, like she was letting down a guard she'd held up for years. I started losing sleep on the nights after I'd been over. Not because anything had happened, nothing had crossed that line yet, but because nothing had, and yet everything felt like it was building towards something. I'd lie there staring at the ceiling fan, replaying the small details, the way she said my name when asking for help, how her tone shifted when Jack wasn't in the room, the accidental brushes that didn't feel so accidental anymore. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that I was reading too much into kindness. Laura was my best mate's mum, for God's sake. Crossing that would blow everything up. Jack's trust, our friendship, whatever fragile piece Laura had built after losing her husband. I reminded myself of that every time my phone buzzed with a harmless text from her. If you're free, could you swing by and check the cabinet door? It's sticking again. But the reminders didn't stick. The more I tried to rationalize it away, the more those moments replayed. The laugh in the garden, the warmth in her eyes, the quiet pull that made me want to stay longer each time. She wasn't Mrs. Parker in my head anymore. She was Laura. And by the time I realized I was waiting for those messages, hoping for another excuse to go over, it was too late to pretend this was just neighborly politeness. That evening started out like so many others had lately. Jack texted me asking if I could swing by and help pull some boxes down from the attic. He was heading out for a night with some university mates and wouldn't be back until late, probably crashing at a friend's place in the city center. "Mum's been nagging me about it," he added with a laughing emoji. "You'd be doing me a solid." I could have said no, made up an excuse about work or being tired, but I didn't. I replied with a thumbs up and headed over after my shift, the sun dipping low behind the trees as I drove. When I arrived, Laura answered the door. She was wearing a thin cream-colored jumper and gray joggers, her hair loose around her shoulders instead of tied back like usual. The house felt quieter than normal. No hum of the telly from Jack's room upstairs, no clatter from the kitchen, just the faint hum of the heating and the soft tick of a clock somewhere in the hall. She smiled when she saw me, that same soft one from the garden, and stepped aside to let me in. "Thanks for coming," she said. "Jack mentioned you'd be by. He's already out." "No worries," I replied, kicking off my shoes by the door. "Attic stuff, right?" We headed upstairs to the pull-down ladder in the hallway ceiling. Laura steadied it while I climbed up first. The air up there was thick with dust and the faint scent of old cardboard. The attic was crammed with holiday bins, forgotten furniture, and stacks of Jack's childhood memorabilia, baseball cards, school projects, that sort of thing. We worked in tandem, me handing boxes down to her stacking them neatly below. It was easy, rhythmic, the kind of task that filled the silence without needing much talk. Halfway through, one of the Halloween boxes slipped its lid as I passed it down. Plastic spiders, fake cobwebs, and a bunch of goofy costumes spilled out onto the floor. I laughed, climbing down to help clean up, and grabbed an old witch's hat from the pile. Without thinking, I plopped it on my head, tilting it at a ridiculous angle. "How do I look?" I asked, striking a pose. Laura burst out laughing, a real full laugh that echoed in the hallway. She covered her mouth, eyes crinkling, and shook her head. "Like you belong in a bad horror film," she managed between breaths. We knelt there, picking up the mess, still chuckling, the moment light and effortless. When the last box was down and the ladder folded away, Laura dusted her hands on her joggers. "I think that's it. Fancy something to drink? I've got some red wine open." I hesitated for a second, but nodded. "Sure, why not?" She poured 2 glasses in the kitchen, and we ended up in the living room, settling on the floor with our backs against the sofa. The lamps were dimmed low, casting a warm golden glow over the room. No telly on, no music, just the quiet hum of the house settling into evening. We sipped slowly, talking about nothing and everything. Old bands we both liked from the 90s, films we'd seen lately, how Jack was eyeing an internship that might take him out of the area next summer. I opened up a bit about my mum, how losing her young left this gap I never quite filled, how I'd got used to handling things solo. Laura listened, swirling her wine in the glass, her expression thoughtful. Then she shared more about her marriage to Mike. It wasn't a dramatic tale, no big fights or betrayals. "Some marriages don't explode," she said softly, staring into her glass. "They just hollow out. One day, you look at the person next to you and realize there's this huge distance built from 1,000 little days where you stopped really seeing each other." Her words hung there heavy in the quiet room. I set my glass down, feeling the weight of them. Maybe it was the wine loosening my tongue or the intimacy of the empty house, but I said something I probably shouldn't have. "I think you still want someone to see you." She turned her head slowly, her eyes meeting mine. This time, there was no ambiguity in that look. No room to pretend it was just friendly. The air thickened like the whole room was tilting ever so slightly toward us. "I think everyone does," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Neither of us spoke after that. The silence stretched, charged until it felt like a physical thing pressing in. I set my glass aside fully, my hand steady but my pulse racing. Laura didn't move away. She just held my gaze, her breathing shallow. I leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull back, to say no, to laugh it off as a joke. She didn't. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, like we were both testing the edge of something fragile. Her lips were warm, tasting faintly of wine, and there was a quiet ache in it, a mix of need and hesitation that made my chest tighten. When we pulled apart, her face was still close, her breath mingling with mine. "This is dangerous," she whispered, her eyes searching mine. "I know," I said. But neither of us moved away. We stayed like that for a while longer, the kiss lingering in the space between us, before I finally stood to leave. It was late when I walked out to my car, the night air cool on my skin. We hadn't gone further than that kiss. No rushed decisions, no crossing lines we couldn't uncross, but it didn't make things lighter. If anything, it made everything heavier, because now there was no pretending that nothing had changed. The days after that kiss fell into a rhythm that was both intoxicating and poisonous. We didn't label it, didn't call it love, or an affair, or anything that would force us to confront the reality. There were no grand declarations, no talks about what came next. Instead, we carved out stolen pockets of time. Early mornings when Jack was still asleep upstairs, afternoons when he'd text that he was at the library, studying, or evenings when I'd come over under the pretense of fixing something minor, a loose hinge, a flickering light, and stay long after the job was done. Those moments were simple at first. We'd sit in the kitchen, her pouring coffee or tea, me leaning against the counter, and talk in low voices about the day. Her hand might brush mine as she passed a mug, or I'd catch her eye across the room, and the air would thicken just enough to remind us why we were there. It felt natural, like something that had been waiting to happen, slipping into place without effort. The sweetness of it, the way her laugh softened when it was just us, the quiet comfort of her presence made the risk feel almost worth it. But underneath, there was always that edge, the knowledge that this was built on borrowed time. Then Jack started being home more. His internship wrapped up earlier than expected, and with it went his late nights out. He stopped disappearing for weekend trips with mates, opting instead to hang around the house, cooking dinner with Laura, tinkering with his car in the garage, or staying up late gaming in his room with the door cracked. His presence changed everything. It wasn't that he suspected anything, he was just there, filling the spaces we'd relied on to be empty. I couldn't slip in through the back door during the day anymore. Laura's texts grew shorter, less frequent. "Jack's home," she'd say, or nothing at all. The casual touches in the kitchen or hallway vanished. If we were in the same room with him, she'd revert to that polite, maternal version of herself, the one who asked about my job with a neutral smile, like I was just her son's friend stopping by. It stung more than I expected, watching her pull back, her eyes flicking to me with a quick, guarded glance before looking away. The close call happened one afternoon. Jack had run out to grab some compost for the garden. Laura mentioned it casually when she texted me to come over and check a light in the laundry room that was buzzing. I figured it was safe, so I headed over. The house was quiet when I arrived. Laura let me in through the front, her hair still damp from a shower, wearing a simple t-shirt and shorts. We went straight to the laundry room, me climbing the stepladder to fiddle with the fixture while she held it steady at the base. We were talking softly about a book I'd recommended, how her week at work had been dragging, when she suddenly froze, her eyes darting to the front window. "Oh God," she whispered. I followed her gaze. Jack's car was pulling into the driveway earlier than expected. My heart slammed into my ribs. I scrambled down the ladder so fast I nearly slipped, the tools clattering to the floor. Laura's face was pale, but she moved quick, grabbing my arm and steering me toward the back door in the kitchen. "Go round the side," she hissed, shoving it open just enough for me to slip out. I ducked low, heart pounding, and crouched behind the bushes in the side garden as Jack's footsteps crunched on the gravel. He called out from the garage, "Mum, you home?" I heard Laura's voice, steady as ever. "In here, love. How is the shop?" The door shut behind him, and I waited there frozen, sweat trickling down my back despite the mild air. It felt like forever before I could sneak back to my car parked down the street, my pulse still racing. That night she called me. Her voice was low, strained, like she was whispering from her room. "I thought he'd be gone longer." "I know," I said, sitting on my sofa in the dark. A long pause stretched between us. "We can't keep doing this carelessly," she finally said, the words heavy with exhaustion. It didn't end with a clean break. There was no dramatic sit-down where Laura looked me in the eye and said, "We have to stop." No tears streaming down her face, no raised voices or slammed doors, nothing to grab onto and call closure. Instead, it faded out in the worst way possible. Slowly, quietly, like a song trailing off into silence until you realize it's over. At first, it was just the texts. She'd take longer to respond, then longer still. Then I'd see the read receipt pop up, but no reply would come. I stopped initiating as much, not wanting to force her into choosing between me and the fragile balance she'd rebuilt at home. When we did cross paths with Jack around, she was still kind, still warm in that polite way, but the door she'd cracked open for me was shut now, locked tight. One afternoon sealed it. I'd borrowed a wrench from Jack a week earlier for a quick fix at my place, and I swung by to return it. Jack wasn't home yet. He'd mentioned something about grabbing groceries on his way back from a mate's. Laura opened the door looking as ordinary as ever, in jeans and a light jumper, her hair pulled back neatly. For a split second, standing there on the threshold, we were just two people who'd once known too much about each other, now reduced to this awkward normalcy. "I brought this back for Jack," I said, holding up the wrench like it was some kind of shield. She took it, her fingers brushing mine just briefly, not lingering but not pulling away too fast either. "Thanks," she said, her voice even. I turned to go, but she said my name. "Ben." I looked back. Her eyes were soft, tinged with sadness, but clear, resolute. "What happened?" "It mattered, but it can't keep happening." I nodded. I'd known it for some time, but hearing her say it out loud made it real, like ink drying on a page. "I know." She drew in a breath, her eyes glistening just a bit at the corners. "I don't want to become something ugly in your life, or in Jack's, or in mine." The words hit hard, but I understood. It was her way of preserving dignity for both of us. She wasn't calling what we'd shared wrong in a moral rant. She was acknowledging the mess it could become if we let it drag on. "I don't think you're anything ugly," I said quietly. "I think you were lonely, and I was there." She held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded like that was the closest thing to absolution she could allow herself. We stood there a second more, the afternoon sun slanting through the trees, before I turned and walked back to my car. No hug, no last touch, just that quiet exchange, and it was done. After that, I stopped dropping by unless Jack invited me. Even then, I'd keep it short. Grab a pint in the garage, talk about work or sport, and head out before things could drift into the kitchen where Laura might be. We ran into each other once at the supermarket, Jack pushing the trolley while she picked out honey and bread. She saw me first, paused for a fraction of a second, then smiled that polite surface-level smile. "Hey, Ben." "Hey." Jack launched into a ramble about a botched exam and some upcoming trip, Oblivious as ever, I nodded along, forcing laughs at the right spots, but my focus was split, watching Laura out of the corner of my eye, noting how she seemed more at ease, less brittle than that first night she'd called about the basement. It should have felt like relief seeing her steadier. Instead, it twisted a little deeper. I threw myself into distractions, picked up extra shifts at the bookshop, stacking shelves until my arms ached and my mind went numb. Signed up for a couple of short road trips on weekends, driving up to the mountains with a few acquaintances, camping under stars that felt too far away. I even started looking at flats further afield, thinking a change of scenery might quiet the echoes in my head. Not running from her, exactly, but from the way every quiet night alone brought it all back. Sometimes I'd drive past their house on my way home, not on purpose, just the route taking me that way. I'd glance over, catch her silhouette reading by the window, or see the curtains drawn with just the kitchen light spilling out. No pattern to it, just glimpses that stirred something I couldn't name. And on the rare occasions when Jack was out front washing his car or something, and Laura was there too, our eyes would meet for an extra beat. Subtle, hidden in the normal flow of conversation. A look that said we remembered but wouldn't touch it. I never asked if she thought about me, never probed if she regretted it, or if those nights, those stolen mornings, those brief hours meant as much to her as they did to me. Questions like that demanded answers. And I don't think either of us could live with whatever those answers might be. What I do know is this. For a while, Laura had looked at me like I was the only one who saw her as Laura. Not the mum, not the widow, not the keeper of an empty house, but just her. And for someone like me, used to drifting on the edges of my own life, being seen that way wasn't small. Maybe that's why I couldn't hate what happened, even knowing it was wrong. It wasn't a real romance, not something with a future or a name you could say out loud in the daylight. It was just two lonely people in the wrong place at the most fragile time, holding on longer than we should have. And sometimes things like that don't end in rage or regret. They end in a quiet ache. The kind you learn to carry like a scar under your sleeve that no one sees but you always feel. In the gentle hush that followed those stolen glances and whispered nights with Laura, I learned one of life's most tender, aching lessons. That true connection often arrives wearing the face of the forbidden. Yet the deepest kindness we can offer ourselves and others is knowing when to let it slip away. We all walk through the world carrying a quiet loneliness. The sort that settles in empty rooms after the laughter fades. The sort that makes a simple touch or a shared laugh feel like coming home. In our hunger to be truly seen, beyond the roles we wear as sons, mates, or widows, we sometimes reach for warmth in the wrong places, and for a moment, it feels like healing. But every line we cross, no matter how softly, leaves a scar that doesn't scream. It simply stays, reminding us that some bonds are meant to illuminate our hearts for a season, not to rewrite the story. Laura showed me that real strength isn't in holding on with desperate hands, it's in stepping back with grace, protecting the fragile piece we've all fought so hard to rebuild. And perhaps that's the quiet gift hidden inside the pain. We emerge a little wiser, carrying our ache not as shame, but as proof that we dared to feel deeply in a world that so often stays numb. If this story stirred something honest in your own chest, I'd love to hear it. Tell me in the comments what lesson it whispered to you. And if you're craving more tales that pull at the heartstrings like this, do hit subscribe and ring that bell. It truly means the world to everyone here.